Vanishing folklore and beliefs.
Dwarves in the Germanic tradition from the fairy mythology. Public domain reading. Circa 1892. The journey of the dwarves over the mountain. On the north side of the Harz, there dwelt several thousand dwarves in the clefts of the rocks, and in the dwarf caves that still remain. It was, however, but rarely that they appeared to the inhabitants in a visible form. They generally went about among them protected by their mist caps, unseen and unnoticed. Many of these dwarves were good-natured and on particular occasions very obliging to the inhabitants, who used, for instance, in case of a wedding or a christening, to borrow various articles for the table out of the caves of the dwarves. It was, however, highly imprudent to provoke their resentment, as when injured or offended they were malicious and wicked, and did every possible injury to the offender. A baker who lived in the valley between Bleckenberg and Quedlinburg used to remark that a part of the loaves he baked was always missing, though he could never find out the thief. This continual secret theft was gradually reducing him to poverty. At last he began to suspect the dwarves of being the cause of his misfortune. He accordingly got a bunch of little twigs, and beating the air with them in all directions at length, struck the mist caps off some of the dwarves, who could not now conceal themselves with their invisibility. There was a great noise made about it. Several other dwarves were caught in the act of committing theft, and at last the whole of the dwarf people were forced to quit the country. In order in some degree to indemnify the inhabitants for what had been stolen, and at the same time to be able to estimate the number of those that departed, a large cask was set up on what is now called Kirchberg, near the village of Thel, into which each dwarf was to cast a piece of money. This cask was found, after the departure of the dwarfs, to be quite filled with ancient coins, so great was their number. The dwarf people went by Wornstadt, a village not far from Quedlinburg, still going toward the east. Since that time the dwarves have disappeared out of this country, and it is only now and then that a solitary dwarf may be seen. The dwarves on the south side of the Harz were in a similar manner detected plundering the cornfields. They also agreed to quit the country, and it was settled that they should pass over a small bridge near Neuhof, and that each, by way of transit duty, should cast a certain portion of his property into a cask to be set there. The peasants, on their part, covenanted not to appear or look at them. Some, however, had the curiosity to conceal themselves under the bridge, that they might at least hear them departing. They succeeded in their design, and heard several during the trampling of the little men, which sounded exactly as if a large flock of sheep was going over the bridge. Other accounts of the departure of the dwarves relate as follows. The Dosenberg is a mountain in Hesse, on the Schwalm, in which not far from the bank of the stream are two holes by which the dwarves used to go in and out. One of them came frequently in a friendly way to the grandfather of Toby in Singlis, when he was out in the fields. As he, one day cutting his corn, he asked him if he would the next night, for a good sum of money, take a freight over the river. The farmer agreed, and in the evening the dwarf brought him a sack of wheat as an earnest. 4 horses were then put to the wagon, and the farmer drove to the Dosenberg, out of the holes of which the dwarf brought heavy but invisible loads to the wagon, which the farmer then drove through the water over to the other side. He thus kept going backwards and forwards from 10 at night till 4 in the morning, by which time the horses were quite exhausted. Then said the dwarf, "It is enough. Now you shall see what you have been carrying." He bade him to look over his right shoulder, and then he saw the country far and near filled with dwarves. "These 1,000 years," then said the dwarf, "have we dwelt in Dosenberg. Our time is now up, and we must go to another land. But the hill is still so full of money that it would suffice for the whole country." He then loaded Toby's wagon with money and departed. The farmer had difficulty in bringing home so heavy a load of money, but he became a rich man. His posterity are still wealthy people, but the dwarves have disappeared out of the country forever. At Offensen, on the Aller in Lower Saxony, lived a great farmer whose name was Hoverman. He had a boat on the river, and one day 2 little people came to him and asked him to put them over the water. They went twice over the Aller to a great tract of land that is called the Allero, which is an uncultivated plain extending so wide and far that one can hardly see over it. When the farmer had crossed the second time, one of the dwarves said to him, "Will you have now a sum of money or so much a head?" "I'd rather have a sum of money," said the farmer. One of them took off his hat and put it on the farmer's head, and said, "You had done better to have taken so much a head." The farmer, who had as yet seen nothing, and whose boat had gone as if there was nothing in it, now beheld the whole Allero swarming, Krimlin und Vimlin, with little men. These were the dwarves that he had brought over. From that time forward the Hovermans had the greatest plenty of money, but they are all now dead and gone, and the place is sold. But when was this? Oh, in the old times when the dwarves were in the world. But now there's no more of them, 30 or 40 years ago.